In the summer of 1962, Marion Brubaker was doing what a lot of 12-year-old girls did before school started again. She was reading library books, taking piano lessons, helping her mother with small errands, and getting ready for 7th grade. She was not far from home when she took a familiar shortcut through the woods. But somewhere along that path, her ordinary afternoon became the center of a case that would never fully settle. There was suspicion almost immediately. There was later a confession. There was even an exhumation decades afterward, hoping science might answer what witnesses and investigators could not. But more than 60 years later, this case is still caught between what people believed, what the evidence showed, and what may have been missed in those first critical hours. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders, where we examine the unsolved cases that still haunt America. In the early 1960s, Akron was still strongly tied to its identity as the rubber capital of the world. Goodyear, Firestone, B.F. Goodrich, and General Tire had helped shape the city's economy and reputation for decades. Akron's population had peaked around 1960 to about 290,000 people, making it a very large industrial city, not a small town. But Marion's neighborhood was not the image people might picture when they think of factory-era Akron. She lived in the Portage Lakes, Coventry area, where wooded paths, lakes, winding roads, and residential areas sat close together. That's what makes Marion's story so difficult to sit with. She was not far from home. She was not somewhere unfamiliar. She was moving through a place local children used because it seemed safe. Marion Joyce Brubaker was a studious 12-year-old just getting ready to start 7th grade at Lakeview School. She was taking piano lessons and dreamed of being a piano teacher. She liked to read and had already made 3 trips to the library that summer. Her father, Reverend Claire Brubaker, was pastor of Hillwood Chapel on South Arlington in Hillwood Homes. Her mother, Ruth, was a homemaker. Marion was the third of 4 daughters. The family lived in a modest home at 201 Killian Road. August 27, 1962 dawned partly cloudy with a few scattered showers throughout the area, but by the time Marion left for the library between 2 and 2:15 that afternoon, the skies had mostly cleared and the temperature was a pleasant 80 degrees. The Portage Public Library at 4261 Manchester Road was about 2 miles away, but considerably further on the winding roads that Marion used. Marion arrived at the library and, just before 3 p.m., she left with 4 books. Princess in Denim, Travel in Titan, Sue Barton, Visiting Nurse, and Secrets of the Martian Moon. She then stopped by Scott's store in Coventry Plaza to purchase a greeting card her mother asked her to pick up. After she left the store, a family that knew Marion saw her in front of 738 Portage Lakes Drive at about 3:12 p.m. They are the only witnesses known to have seen her after she left the store. Police believe she went east on Portage Lakes Drive and then south down Main Street about a block to the beginning of the well-worn, secluded shortcut path that would lead her toward home. She was only 3 blocks away, but Marion never made it out of the woods. At about 4:30 p.m., police were called to the path after a 15-year-old boy reported finding Marion's body. Police arrived to find Marion 40 feet off the path in a thicket. She was partially nude, her face covered with her checkered shorts and panties. She was still warm. Her white blouse and brassiere had been pulled up around her neck and face. Her shoes and socks were piled neatly at her feet. She had been beaten and choked. Her cause of death was later determined to be strangulation. Police believe Marion may have been dragged face down through the area to the thicket. She had dirt in her mouth, nose, and windpipe, indicating she was either alive when being dragged or had her face pushed down in the dirt during the struggle. It's difficult to read those details even now, but they matter because they show how sudden, violent, and close to the path the attack had been. It was unclear whether Marion was riding her bike or walking it when she was attacked. Her bike had been moved from the path and placed under an apple tree. The 4 library books, her shattered eyeglasses, and pocketbook were strewn nearby. The bike and the books appeared to have been wiped clean of fingerprints. Police found blood on the grass alongside a path through the area and fragments of a bottle they believed had been used to strike Marion. It was ultimately determined that Marion was not sexually assaulted, but police theorized the motive was sexual based on the brutality of the attack and the fact that some of her clothing had been removed. Because of her own physical condition, police believe it took a relatively strong individual to overpower her. Marion was 5'2", 123 pounds, healthy, and described by those who knew her as wiry. On another path not far from the scene, police found the August issue of a girly magazine which they believed was tied to the crime. While not a park, the wooded area was visited often by people in the neighborhood, especially during the daytime in good weather. The place where Marion was attacked was a clearing with open ground and no vegetation at the time. Police believed it was someone familiar with the area, stating that it was not an area that would attract outsiders. Investigators then turned to a difficult question: who had been in the woods during that narrow window of time? At first, investigators identified 4 people who were known to have been in or near the woods that afternoon. 15-year-old Ralph Bechter, who found Marion, was a 9th grader at Irvine Middle School, lived near the woods, and was familiar with the area. Then there were 2 young boys playing in the north end away from the crime scene, and a 49-year-old man who admitted to being in the area of the crime but had a history of mental illness. Later, we would find out there was yet another man, the 35-year-old owner of the Girly magazine, who was camping nearby. As we look closer at those first few hours, we start to see cracks forming in the investigation itself, cracks that might have changed the course of this case forever. Behind the scenes, there was significant jurisdictional friction that's rarely mentioned in the headlines. Internal memos from 1962, specifically from reporter Lacey McCrary, paint a troubling picture of what was happening on the ground. According to those records, some felt the initial work at the scene was shoddy. The area wasn't cordoned off immediately, the coroner wasn't called to the site right away, and federal assistance was not requested. On top of that, there was this growing tension between the county deputies, who weren't used to handling high-profile murders, and the Akron detectives, who seemed eager to take the lead. It makes you wonder, in the middle of all that professional infighting, was the most important evidence being protected, or was it being lost? In order to establish a timeline, a deputy sheriff reenacted the bike ride with his 12-year-old daughter using a bicycle similar to Marion's. Police knew Marion had been seen on Portage Lakes Drive at 3:12 p.m. They also knew she was attacked about 900 feet from the entrance of the shortcut, about 200 feet inside the wooded area. The reenactment indicated that Marion would likely have been in the woods near the attack site at 3:32 p.m. A year after the killing, police publicly stated that, due to lack of evidence, it would take a confession to solve the case. Early in the investigation, Sheriff Robert Campbell focused heavily on Ralph Bechter. He believed the boy was guilty. When he met up with the boy that day, Bechter had a torn shirt, an open zipper, and unexplained scratches. Campbell told a reporter, "It's hard to put anyone else in there but him." Prosecutor George Pappas disagreed and felt the investigation should have been broader. A year after the murder, Sergeant Jack Carlton stated that he felt the boy was innocent. His clothing and shoes showed no blood, and none of the physical evidence connected him to the crime. Through the years, Bechter has endured hours of questioning and has consistently denied involvement. He told investigators he was bored that day and passed the time going into the woods at about 3:30 p.m. He said he happened upon Marion's bike, touching both it and the scattered library books. He didn't notice her body at the time. At about 4 p.m., he walked toward a field where a man was plowing. There were conflicting reports about what the plow operator saw, with some reports stating he saw a figure that appeared to be wiping his brow with a handkerchief, and other reports stating only that he had seen a figure at the edge of the field and couldn't tell whether it was a man or a teenager. The plow operator continued working during the entire time, coming as close as 60 feet to Marion's body. Adding yet another layer to this sighting, the 35-year-old man connected to the magazine and the campsite reportedly told police that he also had walked to the edge of the same field and made eye contact with the plow operator. The plow operator reported he only saw one person that day, so who was he actually seeing? Ralph Bechter? The 35-year-old man? Or is this another example of how difficult the early timeline became? The available reporting suggests this man was questioned, but it does not show him becoming a central suspect in the way Bechter did, or later William Lewis. Maybe investigators had reasons to move on from him. Maybe those reasons simply never made it into the public record. But his presence still complicates the timeline. On his way back inside the woods, Bechter noticed Marion's body. He stated that when he discovered Marion, he ran back to the field to flag down the plow operator, but he was leaving the field, so Bechter turned, ran past Marion's body, and back to his home, arriving at about 4:25 p.m. Decades later, reports surfaced that indicated that Bechter admitted to stopping briefly at Marion's bicycle to wipe off his fingerprints because he didn't want to get into trouble. He was given a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive. Akron Police Chief John Traub stated that the test was interrupted several times by sheriff's deputies who told him that they had orders to take Bechter to the coroner's morgue at the Summit County Hospital. Finally, the test was halted by deputies, and Bechter, over Traub's objections, was taken away. In proceedings related to Marion's case, Bechter was judged delinquent and released to his grandmother in West Virginia. Reports about his delinquency hearing are often summarized as though he had been found delinquent for molesting girls in the same woods. But the report is more complicated than that. It describes incidents that took place 2 years prior involving a 13-year-old friend of his sister, while also stating that the delinquency charge resulted from Bechter withholding information during the murder investigation. In other words, the hearing added to the suspicion around him, but it does not neatly prove what later retellings sometimes imply. Bechter has never been charged with Marion's murder. For a time, Bechter remained the name most closely associated with Marion's death. But 2 years after the killing, the case took a turn that seemed, at least briefly, to offer the answer investigators had been waiting for. In 1964, 49-year-old William K. Lewis, an illiterate door-to-door salesman, confessed to the murder. He stated that he had knocked her unconscious with his fist, stripped off her clothes, and choked her to death. A former mental patient, Lewis had visited his sister in the Portage Lakes area earlier that day. He said he knew Marion, and they talked for about 10 minutes on the wooded path before he attacked her. After she screamed, he dragged her face down by the arms toward the thicket where he strangled her. He said he ran toward Killian Road after hearing police sirens. He would later recant his confession, saying police made him confess. Every detail he had provided had been published in the local newspaper. Prosecutors were equally sure that Lewis was guilty, and he was charged with Marion's murder. He was declared insane in April 1964 and unfit to stand trial. Later, a Summit County grand jury refused to indict him for the murder, and he was sent to Lima State Hospital. There, he was considered feeble-minded, but not violent. Marion's death did not only devastate her family, it shook a community that had seen that wooded shortcut as ordinary. This was a place neighborhood children used. Marion had permission to take that path home because it was familiar, and because families believed it was safe. After August 27, 1962, that all changed. A shortcut that had once been part of daily life became the scene of something parents could not easily explain and children could not easily forget. Marion's funeral was held at Hillwood Chapel Community Church, where her father served as pastor. About 500 people attended. It's hard to imagine the weight of that moment. A father who had comforted other families, now standing inside his own church, grieving his own daughter. Marion was laid to rest at Hillside Memorial Park. Her parents have since passed away, and the wooded land where she was killed is now private property. But the questions surrounding her murder have remained, long after the people who first searched for the answers are gone. In 2012, Detective Larry Brown filed an affidavit to officially reopen Marion's case. In that affidavit, he stated that Bechter had failed 3 separate polygraph tests. Here's where the trail gets confusing. When you go back to the original reports from 1962, they only clearly mention one test, and that test was ruled inconclusive after it was interrupted. So we are left with a major discrepancy. Is it possible that there were other tests conducted that the public never knew about? Were those records kept somewhere separate from the early reporting? Or are we seeing how, over 50 years, the public record of a case can become harder to untangle? That matters because in a case like Marion's, details are everything. In 2014, Marion's body was exhumed in the hope that fingernail clippings might provide DNA. But even that hope came with questions. Reporter notes from 1962 indicate Marion's nails were quite short and that earlier scrapings had come back negative. Detective Brown later said publicly that he had not been aware of that information. So again, we have to ask, are there pieces of this case that were lost to time, overlooked in the record, or simply never passed forward? In the end, investigators were unable to obtain DNA that could identify Marion's killer, and once again, the case was left in the same place it had been for decades, full of suspicion, full of effort, but still without a clear answer. More than 60 years later, Marion Brubaker's case still sits between suspicion and proof. There were people investigators questioned. There was a confession that did not hold. There was a later hope that DNA might finally speak for her, but none of it brought a clear answer. That's why Marion's story still matters. Before she became part of an unsolved case, she was a 12-year-old girl looking forward to 7th grade. She loved books, took piano lessons, and was close to home when somebody took her life. If anyone still knows something about what happened in those woods near South Main and Killian Road on August 27, 1962, it's not too late for the truth to matter. Because Marion was more than just questions left behind. She was a daughter, a sister, a student, and a child whose future should have reached far beyond that summer afternoon. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.